Friends, you're on the Military with Summary channel. In this video, we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous 12 hours. We have a lots of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first, we're going to talk about the Ukrainian conflict, where during the previous night, between the 2nd and the 3rd of April of 2026, the Russians attacked the territory of Ukraine using hundreds of drones and dozens of missiles. As of the moment when I started making this video, we still haven't received anything on the matter of how many missiles and drones the Russians used during this attack, because this attack ended just an hour ago or something like this. But we have a lots of pictures, we have a lots of lines, we have a lots of different analysis and so on. So let's discuss everything in details. But before we start, several military experts have already stated that this overnight attack was the biggest attack since the beginning of the conflict on the territory of Ukraine. So let's discuss everything, and first let's talk about the 2nd of April, because basically this overnight attack started in the evening of the 2nd of April of 2026, when the Russians began bombing and attacking the city of Kharkiv. And during the night, we received a lots of updates on this matter. Lots of buildings were damaged and destroyed. Lots of explosions took place on the territory of the city, and it seems that the Russians were suppressing maybe raiders, maybe air defense positions of the armed forces of Ukraine. Very difficult to say what exactly the Russians were doing, but right after the Russians finished the air duel and bombing the city of Kharkiv, they start launching their drones. There are hundreds of drones with the purpose to attack the territory of Ukraine. And here we have the first picture. Here we have first pictures, and this is the approximate situation at a certain points of time between 3 a.m. and 7 a.m. of the 3rd of April of 2026. As you can see, the first batches of drones were answering from the northeastern and the eastern parts of Ukraine, and we're talking about dozens of drones that were moving in the direction of the central part of Ukraine. But it seems that the first batches of drones that were launched by Russians between 3 and 7 a.m. of the 3rd of April of 2026 were destroyed along the border. So as you can see here, we have lots of drones that just answer the Sumy region and the Kharkiv region, and here we don't see anything, which means that the first batches were destroyed by the Ukrainians. And it seems right after the Ukrainians destroyed these first batches of drones, the air defense missiles or air defense weapons of the armed forces of Ukraine ended, because right after the first batch of drones that ended around 6 or 7 a.m. of this morning, the Russians launched the second batch, the second wave of drones, and this time the Russians used more than 100 drones just within one attack. So just in here, in this picture, we can see a big batch of drones that were moving from the area of the city of Sumy in the direction of the central part of Ukraine. Another batch of drones was moving along the border with Transnistria and Moldova. Here we can see that the Russians were launching more and more drones, and that more and more drones were crossing the border with Ukraine and were heading in the central part of Ukraine. So this is probably the most important picture. Here we can see a big group of Russian drones in the central part of Ukraine around the city of Cherkasy, and here we can see how another group of drones were approaching the same area. And all these things were taking place somewhere between 8 and 10 a.m. of the 3rd of April of 2026. It seems before moving further, the Russians decided to concentrate a critical mass in the central part of Ukraine with probably 200 or 300 of drones before moving further. And when the Russians finished the concentration process in the central part of Ukraine, they decided to start moving further, and drones began moving in the northern and the northwestern direction, basically in the direction of the city of Kiev. And somewhere around 9 a.m. or 9:30, we received the report that the city of Kiev was completely surrounded by Russians, by Russian drones. They were flying, hundreds of drones were recorded over the city of Kiev. Lots of explosions took place during this morning. Lots of videos were published on this matter. So the city of Kiev was under very heavy fire, and the Russians used hundreds of drones for these purposes that that first they concentrated and created a critical mass in the central part of Ukraine, and then they used this critical mass to attack the city of Kiev. So, for example, this is the picture of the situation of around 10 a.m. of the 3rd of April of 2026. And this is probably the final seconds with missiles, with drones from the Russian side. And when the Russians finished with the city of Kiev with drones, they began attacking the territory of Ukraine with missiles. And first cruise missiles crossed the eastern border of Ukraine somewhere around 10 a.m. So at the same time when the Russians were attacking the city of Kiev with the first batches of drones they launched somewhere around 7 a.m. So first cruise missiles answered the territory of Ukraine, and the sources reported that Russians used dozens of cruise missiles that were launched probably from somewhere around the Caspian Sea. That was the launching site, and the missiles began moving in the western direction. And as of the first seconds of attack, first minutes of attack, it was very difficult to understand where exactly the Russians were planning to move, because, for example, from these positions, the Russian missiles could move further in the southwestern direction towards the city of Odessa, or from these positions, the missiles could move further in the western direction towards the cities like Lutsk, Ivano-Frankovsk, Vinnytsia, and so on. So that is why it was very difficult to understand for Ukrainians where they need to prepare their positions. And several hours later, before 11 a.m., somewhere between 10 and 11 a.m., it became clear that the Russians most likely would attack in the northern direction, somewhere around the city of Kiev. And here we can see how the missiles were moving further in the northern direction towards the cities of Vinnytsia and Zhytomyr. So, for example, this is the settlement of Zhytomyr. This city is located basically in the central part, or in the most western part of the central Ukraine, and this is the city of Vinnytsia. So there were two batches. One batch of missile began moving in the direction of Vinnytsia, the second one in the direction of the city of Zhytomyr. And as we discussed a minute ago, this overnight attack ended around at 11 a.m. and 31 minutes. The last missile, the absence, the disappear of the last missile of Ha-101 time was recorded right exactly at this time. And according to all these pictures, we see that the Russians using these Ha-101 missiles mainly were attacking the territory between the cities of Vinnytsia, Zhytomyr, and Korosty. So this territory was under very heavy fire, and as you can see, according to this picture, there are several energy lines that connect the western parts of Ukraine with the central part of Ukraine and with the eastern parts of Ukraine. And after all these explosions and all these attacks finished, we start receiving updates about power outages, about problems with electricity through the entire territory of Ukraine. So once again, according to different sources, that attack was one of the biggest attacks since the beginning of the special military operation. But as of the moment when I start making this video, as you can see, we still haven't received neither pictures with roads nor the numbers usually provided by the Minister of Defense of Ukraine regarding the drones that were involved in these attacks. But they will be published, and we will discuss them in details during the evening update. The Ukrainians also attacked the territory of Russia, and yesterday in the evening, pro-Ukrainian sources published this picture. And according to this picture, during the previous evening and during the night, the Ukrainians used 280 drones to attack deep inside of the territory of Russia. As you can see, the Ukrainians were attacking almost in every single direction. They were moving in the direction of the Leningrad region. The Ukrainians were attacking in the direction of the city of Moscow, and lots of drones were flying in the direction of the cities like Rostov, Krasnodarsky Krai, Belgorod, and Kursk. But as of the morning of the 3rd of April of 2026, we haven't received anything that then can confirm that Ukrainians managed to deal significant damage or to destroy another oil refinery. Probably the only thing we have is several pictures from the territory of the city of Belgorod, which most likely was attacked. The Russians stated that overnight, starting from the yesterday's evening, they managed to destroy probably around 100 of drones or something like this. Now let's discuss the situation on the ground, and the most important thing is that during the previous night almost no changes were recorded, and this is something like a pattern, because every time before the beginning of any major offensive operation carried out by Russians, every time first the Russians probably for 3 weeks were bombing and attacking the territory of Ukraine, and when the Russians finished bombardments of the territory of Ukraine with missiles and drones, only then they started another offensive operation. So it seems that something like this we can see right now. During the previous 4 days, the Russians used hundreds, maybe even thousands of drones and hundreds of missiles to attack the territory of Ukraine. The Russians are attacking logistics, the Russians are attacking warehouses, ammo depots, and so on. And it seems that in coming days, we'll see another wave of offensive operation along the entire line of combat contact. As for the previous 24 hours, we received just several videos from different directions. Several updates and changes on the ground. For example, we have changes in the Dobropolye direction. So these are the changes between the dates, and this is an infiltration area. Different mappers reported that Russians, more precisely sabotage and reconnaissance groups of the armed forces of the Russian Federation, managed to improve their positions between the settlements of Novodonbass and Dobropolye. And according to these changes, according to this infiltration area, currently the Russians are just 2 kilometers in front of the settlement of Dobropolye, which is already nothing, and the Russians may enter the settlement of Dobropolye anytime soon. Furthermore, we received additional updates about infiltration areas in the city of Konstantinovka. These are the changes on the ground between the dates. The Russians are keeping advancing in the southern direction, trying to completely encircle the most southern parts of the city of Konstantinovka, where Ukrainian positions still remain. So they are trying to take this territory into complete control, or at least to force the Ukrainians to fall back from this area in coming maybe even hours. We have additional changes in the area of the city of Chasiv Yar. According to neutral mappers, the Ukrainians are keeping infiltration further in the eastern direction, trying to cut or establish control over the main logistic lines that the Russians use to support their offensive operation in the area of the city of Konstantinovka. And we received changes along MO3 road. Here we have additional infiltration zones. One of them was added basically in Russian favor. The Russians are keeping infiltration around the settlement of Minkovka, and the Russians approached Seversky Donetsk-Donbass Canal, and the Ukrainians are keeping infiltration process in the direction of the settlement of Minkovka. Today, the western parts of the settlement was colored as infiltration area. And basically, that's all about changes on the ground, and this is all about the conflict on the territory of Ukraine. Now let's discuss the situation